Christmas is all about roast turkey, isn't it? You should remake it. With that, Caroline, my daughter-in-law, threw the piping hot stew right at me. It's burning. The heat was so intense that tears welled up in my eyes. Emma, you should be thankful it was just your hand. If you had made roast turkey from the start, you wouldn't have been burned in the first place. Caroline, that's just too much. I tried to shield my burned hand with the other, covering it as best as I could. Well, Emma, you're really just in the way. Adam, my husband, and his father Joshua are both doing well for themselves. But you? You're just a housewife, right? Just living off their hard-earned money? How could you say that? My name is Emma, and I'm 62 years old. I live with my husband Joshua, who is the same age as me. It's just the two of us now. We have a son, Adam, who's 30 and moved out once he started working. He got a place closer to his job. Adam works for a well-known company, and as his mom, I couldn't be prouder. Raising him wasn't always this calm, though. 3 years after we got married, when Adam was born, it was really tough. I struggled with the challenges of raising a child. And to make it more difficult, Adam was a sickly child, often catching colds. Back then, I worked as an administrative assistant, and almost every week, I'd get a call from daycare asking me to pick him up. It became a routine to approach the single women in the office, asking if they could cover my tasks I should have been doing myself. The workplace wasn't very supportive of working mothers, and I often felt the cold judgment from my colleagues. Over time, my spirit wore down. Eventually, I realized that I couldn't balance both my job and raising Adam, so I handed in my resignation. For more than 20 years after that, my life was fulfilled by taking care of my family and raising Adam. As he grew, I found more joy and peace in taking care of him, and my energy returned. Every day, I would clean the floors until they sparkled, making sure that Joshua and Adam could live comfortably. I'd prepare meals with care, aiming to make every dish balanced and healthy. But if Adam ever craved something less healthy, I'd still cook it for him, always with a smile. Perhaps because of those balanced meals and a focus on health, Adam eventually became quite strong. Back when Adam was in college, he joined the basketball team. He really built up his physique and became quite muscular. Of course, it was all thanks to Adam's hard work. But I also took pride in knowing that my support at home played a part in that transformation. Even after Adam got a job and moved out, my daily routine remained the same. I'd wake up early each morning to make a nutritious soup for Joshua. Once he left for work, I'd keep myself busy with cleaning and laundry, never taking much time to relax. And when Joshua came back home, I'd welcome him with a warm meal. I felt a deep sense of happiness in supporting my husband and maintaining our home. But then, a turning point came in my life. It was Adam's decision to get married. At 30, just last Sunday, Adam suddenly came back home. "There's someone I want to marry," he announced, explaining that he came back to share the news in person. The person was a woman named Caroline, who is 6 years older than Adam. Adam shared that she worked as a temp at his company, and as she supported him in his role, they grew closer. Since it was a decision made by our precious son, we didn't feel the need to oppose it. So, we gave our blessing for their marriage. Adam spoke with excitement. "We'll get married first, and then have the wedding ceremony next June. Caroline has always dreamed of being a bride in a June wedding." Adam said he'd bring Caroline back to our house in 2 weeks. Seeing Adam's happy face made me smile. Joshua felt the same, with a warm expression on his face. We were ready to support their journey into married life. Or so I thought. Little did I know I was about to discover a whole different side of Caroline. on the promised day. Adam arrived at our house with Caroline. "Hi, I'm Caroline. Nice to meet you all," she said with a polite smile. "Oh yes, likewise," I replied, smiling back. Joshua nodded and smiled as well. Caroline wore a neat dress, giving off the impression of a well-mannered young lady from a good family. "Come on in, Caroline. Let's not just stand around talking," Adam said, ushering her inside. We all gathered in the living room and engaged in light-hearted conversation. Adam kept praising Caroline's work ethic and how great she was at home, making Caroline blush and laugh bashfully. When Caroline learned that Joshua runs his own business, she seemed genuinely surprised but kept smiling. It was all so peaceful, until a single comment from Adam changed the atmosphere entirely. "Oh, by the way, Mom has always been the one taking care of everything at home. I remember coming back from school and Mom greeting me from the kitchen. It always made me so happy as a kid." Adam. My heart swelled at his words. I'd spent all those years as a housewife, devoted to my family, and it felt like it had all been worth it. When I glanced at Joshua, he nodded back at me with a smile. I felt tears of joy well up in my eyes, but that moment was shattered by Caroline. "What? You're a housewife?" Her low, sharp voice made me tremble for a second. But Adam didn't notice how her demeanor changed. "That's right. Mom has always been amazing, taking care of everything. I can't cook at all, so I really admire her," Adam said, laughing cheerfully. However, Caroline's expression remained stiff and cold. "I see, is that so?" The way Caroline looked at me was suddenly cold and distant. After a little while, it was time for them to leave, and Adam and Caroline went back home. The look on Caroline's face when she learned I was a housewife stayed in my mind. Later, I brought up the topic of Caroline with Joshua, and his thoughts were similar to mine. "It's true, her expression did change when she found out you were a housewife. She's Adam's wife, but I think we should be cautious around her," Joshua said, crossing his arms with a serious look on his face. I guess my worries weren't just my imagination. But then again, she's the person Adam chose to marry. "Well, it's not like we'll be living together. We probably won't see much of each other anyway," I said. "Yeah, you're right," Joshua agreed, seeming reassured. Adam and Caroline lived over an hour away by car. I did have my concerns about Caroline, but I figured as long as we didn't see much of each other, things would be fine. Or so I told myself. However, it didn't take long before Caroline started calling me regularly. Each call was filled with one-sided demands from her. That morning, at 10 a.m., Caroline called me again. Knowing that Joshua wasn't home at this time, Caroline's calls always made me uneasy. She was supposed to have a temp job, but she sure seemed to have a lot of free time. As I was thinking this, the phone kept ringing. "Hello, Caroline. Is there something you need?" I finally answered reluctantly. "Ah, Emma, finally you picked up. You sure take your sweet time, especially for a housewife," Caroline shouted loudly. "Well, I do have chores to take care of. Sorry about that," I apologized, trying to keep my voice steady. Caroline let out an exaggerated sigh. "A housewife is just unproductive. You really need to step up your game." I couldn't hold back anymore and finally spoke up against Caroline's belittling attitude toward housewives like me. "I do all the housework to take care of this home. Every day. I put my whole heart into making sure Joshua has a comfortable place to come back to after work. Every day, I clean meticulously, not even letting a single strand of hair remain on the floor. I cook balanced meals, thinking of Joshua's health with every dish. I didn't want my daily efforts to be dismissed so easily by Caroline, so I fought back. But Caroline just sighed, clearly annoyed. You know, people get defensive, especially when someone is right. She sneered. Anyway, changing the subject, there's that patisserie called Patisserie Scut near your house, right? It's about a 15-minute walk from here. Patisserie Scut is a well-known sweet shop in our neighborhood that often has lines of people waiting to buy their treats. Even though it's just for takeout, I've heard you can wait over an hour to get served. Joshua isn't really into sweets, so we've never been there before. Then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, Caroline says, I thought so. Then can you buy their most popular pastry, rusks, for me? Get 10 boxes and ship them over. What? Why 10 boxes? I was stunned by Caroline's request. Even if it's just her and Adam, 10 boxes seemed way too much. But Caroline kept going without a care. Oh, it's for the office. I'm going to bring them as a gift for my colleagues. So, yeah, buy them and send them my way, okay? Wait. Hold on. Caroline hung up before I could say anything more. I tried calling back, but she didn't pick up. How inconsiderate. I muttered to myself. If I bought those pastries, I knew she'd never pay me back. Caroline clearly expected me to cover the cost. I let out a deep sigh, feeling helpless as Caroline continued to treat me however she pleased. Time passed, and Christmas started to approach. Adam and Caroline were planning to come visit us for the holidays. I couldn't shake the feeling of dread about seeing Caroline. She constantly belittled me for being a housewife, boasting that working women like her are far superior. Just recently, during one of our calls, Caroline said to me, Emma, are you just slow? Nowadays, everyone balances work and household duties. Your way of living is so outdated. Her words left me stunned, unable to think of a response. But Caroline didn't care and just kept talking, without any hint of restraint. I work and manage the house, too. I'm not as shameless as you, Emma, living off a man. Caroline laughed while she said it, and I clenched my fists in frustration. Every time I picked up the phone, she'd say something hurtful like that. Honestly, I didn't even want to answer her calls anymore. But I knew that if I ignored her, Caroline would probably go to Adam and twist the story. Adam is my precious only son. I want to keep our relationship strong, as a loving family. So I put up with Caroline's bullying, not wanting to cause trouble. But in the end, that only encouraged her to take advantage even more. On Christmas Eve, Adam and Caroline came home for a visit. Hey, Mom, it's been a while. Welcome back. Seeing Adam's face again brought me such relief. Then Caroline, standing beside Adam, spoke up. Thanks for having me, Emma. She said, smiling sweetly and playing the role of a perfect wife. But I could feel my lips tighten as I forced myself to reply. Caroline, please make yourself comfortable. After showing them to the living room, I quickly went to the kitchen to start cooking. Usually, I'd prepare roast turkey for Christmas, but this year was different. And that was because of Caroline. She always finds ways to criticize me. Just the other day on the phone, she laughed. I bet you only know how to make pot roast, right? How old-fashioned. Can't believe you only cook classic American dishes. It's so outdated. I was sure that if I made roast turkey, she'd just find another way to put me down. So I decided to make beef stew instead. Beef stew is a staple in our house, a dish I've made for Adam ever since he was little. As I was reminiscing about the past while cooking, Caroline suddenly spoke up to me. Emma, is the food still not ready? Caroline's question made me force a smile. It was unimaginable in my time for a daughter-in-law to rush her mother-in-law to cook without offering to help. The beef stew is almost ready. Just a little longer, okay? I replied. But for some reason, her face was tense. And she muttered under her breath. Why beef stew for Christmas? Sorry? Caroline, did you say something? I asked her. Caroline glared at me with an aggressive attitude. Caroline? The next moment, Caroline glanced around the room. Adam and Joshua were in the living room next door, engrossed in a TV show. Then, Caroline did something unbelievable. Christmas is all about roast turkey, isn't it? You should remake it. With that, she dumped the scalding hot stew all over me. Ouch! The burning heat brought tears to my eyes. This was way too much, she'd gone too far. As Caroline noticed my hand turning red from the burn, a smirk spread across her face. Emma, you're lucky it's just your hand. If you had made roast turkey from the start, you wouldn't have been burned at all. Caroline, this is horrible. I tried to shield my burned hand with the other, hiding it as best as I could. But Caroline just laughed and continued to spew hateful words. You see, Emma, you're just a nuisance. Adam and Joshua are both successful, but you? You're just a housewife, right? Living off their hard-earned money like a leech? What? I was speechless at Caroline's mocking laughter. For decades, I'd worked tirelessly to take care of this home. I wasn't living an easy life by any means. And why did I have to take all this from Caroline, who had just become my son's wife? I'd been holding my tongue to avoid causing problems between Adam and me, but my patience had reached its limit. Caroline then leaned in closer, speaking in a hushed but sharp voice. That's why I'm helping to get rid of what's unnecessary. So, be grateful, okay? What? Just then, Joshua, usually calm and collected, stood up and came toward us. The kitchen and living room are part of the same open space in our house. Normally, we use a folding partition to separate the living room and kitchen, but today, I had moved it to the corner of the living room. I wanted to be able to see what was happening in the living room while I cooked. Joshua must have sensed the tension in our argument, despite being focused on the TV earlier. Who do you think you are? What? I said, who do you think you are? Are you deaf? Joshua asked, glaring at Caroline with a look of disgust. The coldness in his eyes was unlike anything I'd seen from my usually gentle husband, and it seemed to throw Caroline off. Of course I can hear you. But Joshua, what's gotten into you all of a sudden? You're looking so scary. With a look of feigned fear, Caroline quickly ran over to Adam, who was watching TV. She lightly grabbed his sleeve. Adam looked startled. Caroline began to explain the situation to him. But I knew it was all part of her act. She was pretending to be frightened, but a small smile played on her lips. After hearing her side of the story, Adam immediately sided with Caroline. Dad, what's going on? Caroline's shocked and scared. Caroline hid entirely behind Adam, peeking out just enough to show a victorious smile, failing to mask her malicious intent. Exactly, Joshua. You suddenly started talking so harshly, I was so scared, she said, lowering her eyebrows to fake a worried expression. But Joshua kept his stern look as he faced Caroline. Then, he spoke directly to Adam. This woman spilled the stew your mom made. And you're going to defend her? Adam, who had been engrossed in the TV, didn't see what happened. He looked bewildered at Joshua's words. But Caroline wouldn't have done it on purpose, right? So why are you blaming her so much? Caroline, with eyes seemingly welling up with tears, spoke up as well. Exactly. I was just trying to help Emma in the kitchen. And then Joshua. She pretended to cry as she continued to hide behind Adam. Caroline's manipulative behavior was driving me crazy. I couldn't hold back my anger any longer and confronted her directly.
Help in the kitchen! You yelled at me to remake the roast turkey and dump the stew on me, didn't you?
At my outburst, Caroline immediately started to cry fake tears. Adam. Emma is being so mean to me. She's only doing this because she doesn't accept me as your wife. Adam looked at Caroline, then turned to me and Joshua.
I want to take care of Caroline, so I'm going to side with her. Adam!
Caroline exclaimed as if moved by his words and clung to him. Joshua and I exchanged looks, our expressions remaining cool and detached. Caroline's fake innocence was so apparent that all I could do was sigh. I spoke to Adam. Adam, can you look at my hand? It's burned. How does it make sense that my hand is burned? If Caroline was the one carrying the stew?
Well,
Adam hesitated for a moment, thinking things over. If the stew had really been accidentally spilled, Caroline should have burned herself too. But Caroline's hands were spotless and pale. I continued. It's not just my hand. The stew is all over my pants as well. Thankfully, I was wearing long pants, so my legs were unharmed. But it was clear that stew had splattered everywhere on my clothes.
Mom's clothes are covered in stew. Do you seriously think it's possible for this to happen just because her hand slipped? Well,
Adam struggled with Joshua's pointed question. Eventually, he turned to Caroline.
Did you do this, Caroline? But why would you do that to Mom?
Of course not. Adam, it's so hurtful that you'd even suspect me. Caroline replied, gazing at Adam with pleading eyes. I couldn't keep silent any longer and spoke to Caroline.
Caroline, cut it out. I saw what you did. You yelled at me to remake the roast turkey and threw the stew at me.
Tell us the truth, Joshua added, his voice steady but firm. Caroline, who had been holding back, suddenly laughed.
Oh, so you figured it out? How boring. Caroline! Why would you do something like that?
Adam shouted at her, clearly shocked. Caroline just chuckled to herself.
Isn't it obvious? Emma is a nuisance. A housewife is just unproductive and pointless, don't you think?
Caroline spoke casually, as if she were making the most natural observation in the world, a smile plastered across her face. I let out a sigh, frustrated beyond words. Why do you look down on housewives so much, Caroline? Just because I'm a housewife doesn't mean I've caused you any trouble. You're nothing but trouble. Joshua runs a business, which means he's wealthy. He probably has loads of savings, right? If he dies and you're still around, I won't get the full inheritance, will I?
Huh?
I was stunned by Caroline's outlandish statements.
And when Joshua dies, Adam becomes the next CEO, right? But how annoying would it be to have a meddlesome mother-in-law around when I become the CEO's wife?
Caroline said, chuckling. It was clear to me now, Caroline's interest was purely in Joshua's assets and the title of CEO's wife. But she was not going to get her way. Adam's not going to take over the company. Our business isn't a family-run one. I'm planning to hand it over to one of my employees. Joshua said calmly.
What? No one told me that.
Caroline's face twisted in frustration as she raised her eyebrows. Adam, bewildered, tried to explain.
I want to do my best at my current job. I never planned on taking over Dad's company. And didn't you say you supported my work, Caroline? Was that a lie?
It seemed that Caroline had been hiding her true intentions from Adam all along.
Of course it was a lie. If you're not going to be the CEO, why would I marry someone like you?
Caroline said it brazenly, without a hint of shame, leaving Adam visibly hurt. With her looks, Caroline could probably marry a more conventionally handsome man. Our Adam wore glasses, and his hair was a bit long. He looked plain at first glance. Just based on appearances, he didn't seem like a match for the refined and beautiful Caroline. Seeing Adam struggle to recover from the shock, I spoke to him gently. This is Caroline's true self. You need to face reality, Adam. Yeah. But Caroline, clearly unbothered, arrogantly leaned back, laughing confidently.
What's so bad about hiding my true nature? If people get fooled, that's their problem.
Her attitude only made my anger toward her flare up even more. I was determined never to forgive Caroline. Just then, Joshua spoke up. I feel sorry for Violet, having a daughter like this. Violet? Who's Violet? I was stunned to hear Joshua mention a name I didn't recognize. Caroline's voice trembled as she spoke.
Violet, how do you know my mom's name?
Joshua calmly explained to Caroline. Violet is someone I met through our company's charity work. You mean the charity program? Joshua's company ran a program to help people over 50 find part-time jobs. Not as temporary workers, but through direct employment. With temporary jobs, the work period is limited. For those over 50, it's not easy to find another placement immediately after one ends. So Joshua's company helped people in their 50s and older find direct employment. Violet was a housewife for a long time. She told me she had a hard time finding a job. Joshua's voice was filled with empathy. Caroline's expression twisted in disgust as she spoke. My dad died when I was in my senior year of college, leaving behind a mountain of debt. Mom was a housewife and couldn't find a job. We lived a miserable life. Caroline's father had lost a lot of money through failed investments and passed away shortly after. At the time, Caroline was still attending university, struggling to balance her studies and work. Violet, her mother, tried to find work but couldn't land a job.
Mom was to blame for staying home as a housewife, not working. Because of her, I couldn't pay my tuition and had to drop out of college.
To my surprise, Caroline's highest level of education was high school. Since she had to work immediately after leaving university, she chose to become a temporary worker. For 15 years, she had worked tirelessly. You must have gone through so much. I accidentally let my true feelings slip, but my words only seemed to make Caroline angrier.
Huh? What's with that condescending tone? You're so annoying.
I didn't mean it like that. But it seemed there was no point in trying to reason with her.
That's why I hate housewives like you. I wish I'd poured that stew with more force so that you'd get more than just a burn. So you'd be useless and Joshua would divorce you.
I was speechless at Caroline's words. My hand was clearly burned and in pain. But rather than showing any remorse, Caroline wished she had hurt me more. It was beyond normal behavior. Suddenly, Adam pulled away from Caroline.
Adam!
Caroline looked at him in confusion. Adam spoke up, his voice trembling with anger.
You did this to Mom? I can't be with you anymore, Caroline. I want a divorce.
Adam. Seeing Adam in so much pain hurt me deeply as well.
Huh? Adam, are you serious? With that plain look of yours, you won't find anyone else to marry if you divorce me.
Caroline didn't seem to believe Adam was serious, speaking with full confidence. How much did she look down on Adam? Adam had a solid education and worked for a top-tier company. Even if he looked plain, there would surely be someone who would love him for who he was. Caroline had clearly never really seen the true Adam. Adam's voice was firm as he spoke.
I'm serious. And I'll never forgive you for what you did today. Let's handle this through our lawyers.
His eyes were cold as ice. Caroline must have realized that Adam was serious.
Adam, you're joking, right?
She looked up at Adam with pleading eyes. After showing her true nature like that, why did she think she could fix things now?
There's nothing more to say. There's no way to repair this. No. I absolutely don't want a divorce.
Caroline started to cry. Unlike her earlier fake tears, this time, they seemed real.
I sympathize with what you've been through, Caroline, but this is going way too far.
I said. No matter what, dumping stew on your mother-in-law is inexcusable. Caroline glared at me.
Shut up! It's your fault for being a lazy housewife. You're just in Adam's way. How pathetic.
Arms crossed, Caroline fumed with anger. It seemed no amount of reasoning would get through to her. Joshua stepped forward and spoke to Caroline. It's time. Ha! Just as I was trying to grasp what was happening, the doorbell rang. Joshua went to the front door and came back to the living room with a woman. In that instant, Caroline's expression stiffened.
Mom! Why are you here?
I called her. I knew how to get in touch. Joshua replied. Ignoring the now pale-faced Caroline, Violet apologized to Joshua and me. I deeply apologize for all the trouble Caroline has caused. I'll take her home right away.
Huh? I'm not going anywhere.
Caroline protested, but Violet stood her ground.
You even hurt Adam's mom. Do you have any idea what you've done? If you get sued, don't expect me to defend you. Sued? No, that can't be.
Caroline's face turned even paler. She clearly hadn't considered that possibility. If I looked closely, I could see Caroline's arms trembling slightly. Violet sighed at the sight.
Your first step is to sincerely apologize. That's my last piece of advice to you as your parent. Huh? When Adam and Caroline's divorce is finalized, I will cut all ties with you. Don't ever contact me again. You've always hated me for being a housewife, haven't you? Well, this works out perfectly for you.
No, that's not true. Tears streamed down Caroline's face, her expression completely messed up. Deep down, she must have really loved her mom, Violet. I spoke to Violet.
I don't need an apology from Caroline. At this point, any apology she gives would be meaningless.
Then, turning to Caroline, I continued.
Caroline, you might think lightly of what happened today. But what if my burns had been more serious? What would you have done then? I don't know.
Caroline struggled to find words. It was clear she hadn't thought that far.
If you'd left her with a lifelong injury, I would never have forgiven you. I'd use all the power I have to make sure you face the consequences.
Joshua added, his voice stern. Unable to respond, Caroline fell silent. Adam glared at Caroline with a harsh look in his eyes.
I will never forgive you for hurting my mom, Caroline. I don't want to see your face ever again. And I will make sure we never cross paths at work either.
Adam's words left Caroline in a state of confusion.
Huh? But we work at the same company. How can you say we'll never cross paths? I'm the CEO of the staffing agency you're registered with. My job is to send trustworthy employees to our clients. Do you really think you meet that standard? Ah.
At Joshua's words, Caroline's face turned completely pale. She'd probably never cared about who the CEO of the staffing agency was until now. Holding out my burned arm for Caroline to see, I said,
"Someone who would hurt their in-laws can't be trusted to go to our clients' companies. If it comes down to it, I'll personally explain the situation to HR at Adam's company."
"Mom, you don't need to go that far. I have good connections in HR. I'll explain everything myself. And, of course, I'll make sure everyone in our department knows what happened. Caroline won't have any place left there." It seemed Adam's words were the final blow to Caroline. She hung her head in complete defeat.
"You don't have the right to be shocked. You should be reflecting on everything you've done up until now."
I didn't hold back my words as I continued to confront Caroline. She had disrespected my precious son, Adam. And as his mother, I couldn't just let that slide.
"Oh dear, it looks like you've been completely cut off. But that's your own doing. You brought this on yourself,"
Violet said with a subdued laugh. Violet must have decided to sever ties with her daughter, Caroline. It wouldn't have been surprising if she'd been more supportive of her only child. But Caroline had done too much, to the point where even Violet couldn't defend her anymore. Perhaps as a parent, Violet had decided it was best to distance herself from Caroline. "Well then, I'll take my leave now. Please allow us to arrange a formal apology later," Violet said, while apologizing multiple times. She then took Caroline with her and left our house. Caroline, seemingly exhausted from crying, was dragged away by Violet. In the end, Caroline never apologized. I was sure Caroline would face some harsh consequences in the future. Eventually, Adam and Caroline divorced. However, the divorce process was quite contentious. Because Caroline had called Adam plain, I decided to give him a makeover. We cut Adam's bangs to show more of his face. We also swapped out his glasses for contact lenses. And suddenly, Adam looked like a handsome young man. After all, Adam takes after Joshua, and his natural features were already quite good. When Caroline saw Adam in his new look at the lawyer's office, she was shocked.
"What? He looks totally different,"
Caroline muttered in disbelief. Adam, however, spoke to her with a firm tone. "I'm divorcing you, Caroline.
I can't be family with someone who would so casually harm another person."
Caroline was at a loss for words, but quickly snapped back to her usual self. "I'll apologize to Emma for what I did." "Can't we start over?" Caroline said with a smile. I couldn't believe she was still acting so shamelessly, as if nothing had changed.
"I don't need a daughter-in-law like you. I can't be family with someone I don't trust."
Joshua, who was sitting beside me, nodded in agreement.
"We don't want to be involved with someone who's only after money." "Huh? That's so rude."
Caroline tried to snap back with a strong tone, but Violet's glare made her go silent. It seemed that Caroline was still afraid of her mother.
"If you keep dragging out this divorce, I'll take appropriate action." "Do you really want to make this a big deal?"
Violet warned Caroline sternly, fixing her with a sharp look. Caroline finally seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation and shrank back. I'm sorry." Caroline finally apologized, but it was too late. In the end, Caroline signed the divorce papers. I also received compensation from Caroline for the burn on my arm, in line with standard practice. Caroline was registered with the staffing agency run by Joshua. She must have signed up with Joshua's agency on Violet's recommendation. Some staffing agencies only accept candidates who have graduated from college. In contrast, Joshua's staffing agency didn't consider educational background. which likely made it easier for Caroline to register. Due to the recent events and Caroline's erratic behavior, Joshua was concerned and contacted the HR department at the company where Adam worked. He advised them to terminate Caroline's contract before her assignment ended. Following Joshua's suggestion, the HR manager at Adam's company ended Caroline's contract early. It turned out the HR manager had already been concerned about Caroline's conduct. Apparently, Caroline distributed the sweets I was forced to buy to the young male employees only. She didn't share them with any of the female staff. There were frequent complaints from the female employees that Caroline was trying to curry favor with the male workers. Some newly hired young women even found Caroline's cold attitude toward them to be traumatizing. Perhaps Caroline couldn't stand anyone who was prettier than her. She also prioritized work given to her by male colleagues, neglecting tasks from the female staff. Moreover, Caroline acted normally around the HR manager, making it difficult to judge her behavior. She likely tried to make a good impression on those in higher positions. While Caroline may have thought she was handling things well, it was ultimately her own actions that led to her downfall. When Joshua found out about the situation, he was shocked and immediately apologized to the HR manager. Shortly after, Caroline's contract was terminated early. I believe it was the right decision. Caroline ended up losing her job. Currently, she lives in an apartment with Violet, but with the divorce finalized, Violet plans to sever ties with her. In the near future, Caroline will probably lose her place to live as well. I heard that she had to take out a loan to cover the compensation for my burn. I'm not sure what kind of future awaits a woman in her late 30s who has debt. Caroline will likely continue to regret how she treated me. 3 years have passed since then. Adam is starting a new chapter in his life. He's getting remarried. Adam's new wife is 3 years younger than him. Since his makeover, Adam has had more women approach him. He grew closer to a woman his boss introduced him to at work. I met this woman recently. She's very family-oriented. Her appearance is simple, and she has a kind aura. She's dedicated to taking care of the family and looks forward to having children with Adam in the future. Most importantly, she values us as Adam's parents. Because she cherishes Adam, she also wants to cherish Joshua and me. I truly think Adam found a wonderful wife. Joshua is still working hard as always, and I stay busy with cooking, laundry, and other housework. Though it's hectic, I find happiness in our peaceful, everyday life. I have a mission to take care of our home. And today, I'll keep working hard to fulfill that mission.
So, I'm planning a trip with your grandparents, Anson. How about you? Do you have any plans?
I called my son, Anson, after we were invited on a vacation by my in-laws.
Well, I have practice. You all should go and have fun. But isn't this trip a bit out of the ordinary? Are you okay, Mom? I'll manage. I'll bring you back a souvenir, so work hard at your practice.
Anson, under my influence, has always been into marathon running. He even got into college on a running scholarship. He studies at a university that isn't too far, but he stays in the dormitory to save commuting time and only comes home during long holidays. I knew he couldn't join the trip, but I thought I should at least ask him. His response was exactly what I anticipated. My name is Flora. 46-year-old working woman. My husband, Steve, is 4 years older than me and was once my boss. He is a competent man, and I respect him. After our marriage and the birth of our son, we built a happy family. Yet, somewhere along the way, our relationship began to break down. The root cause? My husband's parents, especially his mother, who had a problem with me from the moment we got married and has been bullying me ever since. However, in the beginning, Steve would stand up for me, and because we lived far away from his parents, we seldom met them and managed to get by. But when our son, who loves marathoning, wanted to attend a high school near my in-laws, things changed. The reason he got into running was me. I used to run marathons and still do occasionally. It made me happy to see him take an interest in running, just like me. So, I convinced Steve to move closer to the high school my son wanted to attend. Steve applied for a transfer at work for our son's sake, and we moved. My son was recommended for his university from this high school, so I think it worked out well. Go get the rental car tomorrow morning and pick up my parents on your way back, Steve said the day before our trip. This left me confused.
Huh? Why am I the one renting the car? What are you going to do? I'm tired from work, so I'll sleep until the last minute. Once you pick up my parents, come back and I'll take over from there. It's in the same direction as our destination, anyway. I could understand what he was saying, but if anything, I was more exhausted. Despite working similar hours, I was the one taking care of all the housework. When I think about it, we used to split the household chores equally. However, ever since we moved closer to his parents, they've been visiting us frequently. When his mother saw Steve doing housework, she vehemently opposed it. Housework is the wife's job. It's not something the breadwinner should do. Isn't that right, Flora? Overwhelmed by her intensity, I initially nodded in agreement. This continued until Steve eventually stopped doing anything around the house. It was partly Steve's fault, but I believe the main cause was his mother. Moreover, Steve started to echo his mother's sentiment, saying, "I am the breadwinner," every now and then. By that time, it was too late for me to correct the situation and I didn't even feel like trying anymore. Steve changed drastically over the past few years. His work performance seemed to have declined, and he frequently vented his frustrations on me. However, I realized that arguing back was more trouble than it was worth. So, I decided to simply accept things as they are. That's the least stressful way for me to live. There were times I considered getting a divorce, but when it came time for our son's college recommendation, I feared it could disadvantage him if we were a single-parent family. So, I couldn't go through with the divorce. Instead, I tricked my mind into believing I was taking care of a dog, not a person. And surprisingly, it did relieve some of my stress. So, I began to feel like it wasn't worth expending my energy on getting a divorce. And that's how I've arrived at where I am today. The reason I agreed to join this trip was because it was to a resort that I absolutely love. I knew I could thoroughly enjoy myself even if I ended up doing things alone. Heck, I was even ready to do things separately from my in-laws and husband. Perhaps I was invited mainly because they needed someone to share the driving. But both my husband and my father-in-law can drive, so it'll work out one way or another. Anyway, I played along with the notion that our pampered pooch was being demanding again, went to get the rental car as my husband instructed, and headed to my in-laws' place. Flora, you're late. Is that the car for today? You should have rented a bigger one. Well, it's better than your tiny car at least.
The car we usually use is the one I bought. Since I drive to work, I assumed I would be the primary user, and I paid for it myself. We don't go out of town often, and I thought a small car would be just fine. Plus, I loved its interior design and color, so I bought it. And yet, my husband would take it without asking, and even let his parents ride in it. What's more, my in-laws complain about the car being small and look down on me, as if I could only afford a small car. I thought they could just use father-in-law's car for the trip. Father-in-law, however, didn't like others driving his car, but also didn't want to drive it himself for the entire trip. So, we ended up renting a car. Even so, I wasn't consulted about any of this. I just found out that I would be the one to pick up the rental car and drive it, and that they'd be in the back seat the whole time. It made me want to tell them to drive themselves. In a word, they are tiresome. In the end, my husband, who had said he would take turns driving, slept the entire time. Father-in-law didn't want to drive unless it was his own car, so I ended up driving all the way to our destination. Inside the car, with my husband asleep, father-in-law kept criticizing my driving. He would say things like, "You could have turned left there, even though the oncoming car was obviously approaching," or "Why didn't you go even though you knew the light was turning red?" It was nothing but unnecessary stress. My mother-in-law joined in, saying, "Flora, your driving is as bad as ever. Flora, your driving is as bad as ever." I didn't want to be criticized by mother-in-law, who can't even drive, and at least I'm better than father-in-law, who, as far as I know, has crashed his car at least 5 times. Despite being told he should surrender his license before causing a major accident, father-in-law keeps insisting it was just bad luck and that he is a good driver, so everything will be fine. Well, I didn't want to ride in a car driven by father-in-law anyway. I don't mind driving, but I'd appreciate it if they could stop interfering all the time. Upon reaching our destination, my husband finally woke up. Since we had been in the car all day and were tired, we followed my in-laws' wish to spend the day relaxing in the hotel. So, we didn't go out. I enjoyed myself by swimming in the pool and exploring the hotel. In its own way, it was a fulfilling time. After having dinner and going to the spa, I returned to find my husband already asleep. I didn't know what my in-laws were doing in the next room, but they were probably asleep too. I had a beer in the room before crawling into bed. I woke up in the fresh morning air. My husband was still asleep, and with some time until breakfast, I decided to take a morning stroll. But when I came back, the unthinkable had happened. Upon entering the room, my husband was nowhere to be found. Shocked, I scanned the room. His luggage was also missing. I stepped out and rang the doorbell to my in-laws' room next door, but there was no answer. When I went to the front desk to inquire, I was told my husband and in-laws had already finished breakfast. Though they had told me breakfast was at 8:30, it seems they actually reserved it an hour earlier. Exactly when I had gone for my walk. And on top of that, I was left to check out. Did that mean my mother-in-law's offer to pay for our stay was a lie? With no other option, I paid for both rooms and left the hotel. Of course, there was no car. As I was pondering what to do next, my cell phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. Where are you now?" When I asked that, my mother-in-law started laughing. "We thought we'd spend some quality time as a family since we're on vacation." "Oh, is that so? Well then, why didn't you just come as 3 from the start instead of leaving me behind?" "Well, you wanted to come here, didn't you, Flora? That's why we brought you along." I remembered a while back mentioning how I wanted to visit this resort while watching TV with my husband. Is that what he remembered? Usually, it would be nice if he remembered what I casually said, but this time, it was used just to annoy me. Moreover, I was the one who did most of the driving to get here. Why do I have to hear that I was brought here by my mother-in-law, who neither drove nor paid? I was past the point of anger and could only sigh. "All right then, we'll go sightseeing as a family and head home first. You do some sightseeing too, Flora, and come back. We don't know how you'll get back, but you're good at marathons, aren't you? Just run back." At my mother-in-law's mocking laughter, my anger exploded. "Is Steve driving? Put me on speakerphone so he can hear me." When I said that, it seemed my mother-in-law switched over, and I could hear my husband's voice. "Good morning. You wanted to come here, didn't you? Take it easy today. But remember, there's laundry from the trip to be done. Make sure you wash it by tomorrow morning." He sounded cheerful. I had no more feelings for him.
What? Do your own laundry.
Hey, that's no way to talk. I, the breadwinner, am telling you to take it easy today. You should be saying thank you. Oh, right. The breadwinner. But don't worry, this is the last time we'll see each other. Well, all you've really seen of me is me sleeping. What do you mean?
What?
We need to come home today. There's laundry and house cleaning to be done. Yeah, that's why I'm not going back.
What are you talking about?
His voice was shaken, and with that, I said, "I'm getting a divorce." You told me half a year ago, didn't you? That you met your soulmate, your childhood friend, and you were going to marry her? You reunited when she moved back to your hometown, right? The childhood friend who had divorced. Remember, you showed me the divorce papers back then. That was about 6 months ago. I'd confronted my husband because something felt off, and he came clean. He'd met his childhood friend and decided she was his soulmate. He wanted to divorce me and remarry her. She had a middle school-aged child and was struggling as a single mother, and he wanted to support her. So, he asked me for a divorce. Truthfully, I'd lost my feelings for my husband, but I wasn't quite ready to say, "Okay, let's get a divorce." He gave me the pre-filled divorce papers, but I didn't agree to divorce. We didn't speak for a few days after that, but when I stopped doing the household chores, he was in a bind. A few days later, he said, "Forget about what I said before." Well, I couldn't just forget it, and I started gathering evidence of his infidelity. Could it be that Steve planned this trip to get on my good side? I mused. The conversation happened about 3 months ago. It was right after you quit your job. At my words, surprised voices from my in-laws on the other end of the speakerphone echoed. This must have been the first time they heard about their son quitting his job. When you said you were quitting your job, I told you it would be hard to get a new job, and I disagreed with your reason, right? I recalled. You said that you were an excellent worker and would find a new job right away, but you only found a part-time job. I wonder when you'll find a proper job. My husband was driving, and while he was staying quiet, I took the opportunity to spill everything. I'd been coping with stress by imagining you as a dog, but then I thought, I might as well get an actual dog, I declared. So, I'll submit the divorce papers. Enjoy your family vacation. My in-laws were calling my name in shock, and my husband was trying to say something, but I cut the call without paying any attention. I decided to enjoy sightseeing before heading home. When I explained the situation over the phone to my son, "See, I told you," he said. "Well, if you're divorcing, then it's fine." Anson, his reaction was lighter than I expected. Given he knew the situation, his reaction was as expected. Even though I returned from the trip, I didn't go home. In fact, I'd been keeping my and Anson's belongings in a self-storage, ready for any situation. I had the bare necessities with me, so I dragged my suitcase to a real estate agency. The sales representative, who had a professional relationship with me, was there to greet me. She was a woman of my generation, easy to talk to, and we'd hit it off and had drinks together a few times. Over drinks, I'd complained about my husband and in-laws and asked her to always keep an eye on available properties just in case. That day, I signed a contract. With my own place secured, I felt relieved and decided to submit the divorce papers at the city hall. The divorce was granted without any issue. Finally, I decided to return the countless calls my husband had made. Hello? I started. The divorce papers have been accepted. We are now officially strangers. At that, my husband's panicked voice echoed in the phone.
Are you serious about the divorce? I broke up with her. Now there's only you. You didn't like me looking at another woman, right? Now I'm only looking at you, so come back without worries.
But all I felt for his words was revulsion. Huh? What are you talking about? I never intended to please you in the first place. And you didn't break up with her, did you? You were dumped because you couldn't find a job and you had no money, right? It turned out that my husband's mistress was the friend of the sales rep who had introduced us to our new place. Talk about a small world. She had been listening to complaints about my husband from the mistress, who claimed to be his current girlfriend. And apparently, after he quit his job and started working part-time, she saw no point in being with him and broke up. But a fling is a fling. I'm definitely going to demand compensation. That's right. Even if they've broken up now, the fact remains that he cheated, and there's evidence.
Compensation? I told you, we broke up. Now there's only Flora you.
I can only sigh at this point. So you're saying that now that you're single, you're thinking of having another affair? I don't care what you do, but I'm done being exploited. You didn't even notice that your stuff at home was missing because you didn't care, did you? I'm not going back, so throw away what you don't need. With that, I hung up the phone. Even after that, my ex-husband kept calling me, and even my former in-laws reached out, but of course, I'm never going back to that house. My ex-husband still hasn't found a job, can't pay the rent, and has moved back in with his parents. My ex-father-in-law is still driving dangerously and recently crashed into a neighbor's fence with my ex-mother-in-law in the car. Fortunately, no one else was injured, but they didn't have property insurance and had to borrow money to cover the repair costs. All of this was written in emails that my ex-husband kept sending me on his own. I find his misfortune slightly amusing. I don't reply, but I haven't blocked his emails either, just quietly enjoying the show. Since I moved to a pet-friendly property, I started keeping a small dog and realized that I enjoy taking care of a dog more than taking care of people. My son, worried about me being alone, has started coming over on weekends, a change from his previous habit of only visiting on long holidays. I'm living a fulfilling life every day. Maybe this weekend, I'll go back to that resort town for the first time in a while.